Hello and welcome to session 2 of our Lent course. This evening's is called Traveller's Tales, and we all have a traveller's tale. We all have a story to tell. Last week we talked about how difficult it can be to talk about our own stories unless we're enthusiastic about the subject, and we feel that we know sufficient enough to talk about it. Well, this evening, the four of us are going to talk about our faith journeys. I asked each of my colleagues to bring an object to speak about which symbolises their faith journey, either the beginning, the middle, or towards the end. But our journeys don't end here, they end with Christ. So, shall we start with Karen? Have you brought an object, Karen?
Here's my object. It's a journal, a notebook. So how does that fit into my faith journey? Well, I was a cradle Anglican, baptised shortly after I was born and brought up in the church. And I was steeped in the Anglican church as a child, the rhythm of the seasons, the festivals, and really that was the case until I was probably about 18 when I went away to university and I encountered different cultures and different faiths, and it was all so exciting and so diverse. And I think from that time I was really, open to the world, and I possibly started attending church less and less. And even though I renewed my baptismal vows each Easter, I wasn't a big church attender in my 20s and my 30s. Still a Christian, but not a big church attender. And then when it came to possibly, it was in my early 40s, the year 2002, that was a really bad year for me. Very early in the year, I lost a very close friend to suicide. And it was only very shortly after that my sister was diagnosed as terminally ill. And we lost her just a few months after that. And I did a lot of praying during that time, but I encountered silence. So I think I could have gone two ways. I could have let my faith go because it would have been meaningless, or something else could have happened, which is what happened, and I'm struggling to explain it now. Because rather than let my faith go, it actually deepened my faith in a huge way. And at this time, my parish priest suggested I start to keep a spiritual journal and to write down everything I was experiencing. And so this is the first spiritual journal that I began keeping. And there you are, it's packed full. And there are another 3 that follow on, taking me right to today. And these are very special books. And if I just open them, there are prayers, there are poems, there are readings from the Bible, there are photographs. There's an extract here from The Girl with a Pearl Earring by Tracy Chevalier, a book that really, not a religious book, but it spoke to me, and it spoke to me about faith. It finishes up with the line, "After that, I could not stop looking at things." And that was really how I was finding faith. I just couldn't stop looking at my faith again. And then if I turn on, there's a quote from Julian of Norwich. Many of you will have come across it. He did not say, "You shall not be tempest tossed, you shall not be work weary, you shall not be discomfited," but he said, "You shall not be overcome." So this journal is full of things like that. And as I say, this is the one I'm keeping at the moment. And there are 3 long reflections in there that I did during lockdown. So I wouldn't be without those journals, because when I read them, it takes me back through my journey of faith again from 2002 to the present day.
Thank you, Karen. Someone else going to share?
Yes, I think I'm next on. Again, like Karen, I was a cradle Christian. And over the years, from being about 16, 17, that was the start of me holding many positions in church. But never, ever, ever thought about joining the priesthood. Not that you could have done early on because they didn't ordain women. But if you'd said to me in several years' time or in 20 years' time, you're going to be not only a priest in the Church of England, but you're going to be a stipendiary priest in the Church of England, I would have laughed at them, told them they were crazy, ... And looking back now, there were several occasions when God came into my life. And on those occasions, I decided to ignore him. Until one day, I went to Oxford with a friend of mine who was being ordained, and she was at Cuddesdon College. And we went to see her, myself and a friend went to see her and spend the weekend with her. And what happened at Oxford that weekend completely changed my life. We spent the weekend, the first week, Friday night, we went out and ate and had some drinks. And on the Saturday night, we came together actually in Cuddesdon College itself, where my friend had organised a room for us to cook a meal. So we cooked a meal. With a lot of gin involved, which is always the highlight of any of my stories, because gin always seems to be there somewhere. And we had a conversation, and my colleague started to say to me that she thought I'd missed my vocation, that I should have done something about it earlier. And we sort of had this bizarre conversation, as I say, when we had been drinking a lot of gin. So she got a lot of this out of me. Weren't drunk, we were, but we had gin to drink. And then we said goodnight and we went our separate ways. Jan went off back to her college room, and I went back to my room, and my other friend went back to her room. And sat down, made a coffee, and started to think about what Jan had actually said to me, what my friend had said to me. Anyway, I went through into my room, my bedroom, and for some reason, and I still don't know the reason, I didn't draw the curtains. I left the curtains open. Anyway, went to sleep. And then I woke up, and it had gone very frosty outside, and the moon was shining, and I got up to shut the curtains. And when I looked through the window, the frost was everywhere. It was on the plants, it was on the flowers, it was on the trees, and the moon was lighting them all up as if everywhere was covered in diamonds. I can still see it now, absolutely spectacular. Nature had played this trick, this wonderful, wonderful trick of lighting up the garden and the sky and the moon shining on it. And as I looked and I stood and I stared, I thought, no, I must get back to bed, must get back to sleep. When I turned round, where my head had been on the pillow, the moonbeams were shining dead in the centre of the pillow. It was absolutely stunning, and I couldn't get the sight of it out of my mind. Went back to bed and tried to sleep and couldn't sleep. All these occasions that people had said to me, you've missed your way, you should be doing this for a living. You should be leading Lent groups and doing intercessions in church. It comes naturally to you. Why aren't you doing anything about it? And I kept thinking of these things, all these things coming into my head. It was like somebody slashing a vein in my arm, and all this stuff was coming out, and I couldn't stop the bleeding. My head was like, well, I don't know what it was like, because the morning afterwards, when I awoke and I went and I spoke to Jan had already gone off on a placement somewhere. She was preaching somewhere, couldn't talk to anybody. She came back and we had lunch, and we went to get the train back home, a friend and I couldn't speak to her. And to clue what had happened, I just know that all this stuff was in my head, and it was like wading through a pot of treacle. Several weeks later, my friend said to me when she got back home, she said, you know, you're going to have to sort this out. You're going to have to go and see your parish priest about this. And so in the end, I went. And the first thing he said to me was, we need to get you in to see David Sharples. And without going into the rest of it, when I actually got to see David Sharples and he sort of spoke to me and he said, I think there's something very powerful going on in your head. And I said, well, if you can tell me that that's what all this is about and it's God calling me, I'll give everything up and become a priest. And that's exactly what happened. So the object I brought is my conker. The conker that I found on the path to my first introductory training session when I went to ordination college. I found it on the path. It was set inside its lovely casing, half split open, and I picked it up. And it's been with me ever since. It's almost as if in nature's story, it began as a seed and grew, fell off the tree, and then it hit the ground and it split in two. And all you could see was the conker. When I look back on my own faith journey, that's a bit like my faith journey. I did so much stuff, never thinking that it was a faith journey at all. And then gradually it came to fruition. And eventually I listened to God, gave everything up and went to training college, just like the story of the conker. And it's this conker that goes with me everywhere I go. And it's normally found in my car. So that is my slightly condensed version of my faith journey.
Thank you, Judith. It's me next, isn't it? Well, I have brought this book. This book is very precious to me because on the inside, it's signed by the Bishop of Hume. And he was Bishop of Hume in 1993 when I received this book. And this book was a gift from my vicar then, Donald Price, on the occasion of my confirmation. And I wasn't a young girl. I wasn't even a teenager. I wasn't even a young woman. Well, yeah, I was 38. And I wasn't confirmed until 38. I had a checkered childhood where faith's concerned. I loved nothing more than debating with my father, whose father was a lay preacher. My father had a great faith, which took him through the war. But I used to love debating with him about there being a God or no God in existence, and that I didn't believe. And then at the age of 14, I had two sisters and we slept in the same room, a bit like a Nightingale ward, 1 bed, 2 bed, 3 beds. And I was in the middle because we went age range, you see. Mother was very concise. And I woke up in the night and it was extremely dark. And although I had my sisters, one on either side of me, I had never felt so alone, so scared, and not knowing what to do. The only thing I felt I could do was pray. And the only prayer I ever knew, because anyone of my age knows the Lord's Prayer by rote. And that's what I kept praying. And I kept saying to God, my soul is yours, my soul is yours. Don't know where it came from, but that's it. Next morning I got up, didn't tell a soul. And then my circumstances were very strange. I moved in with my parents who were both infirm, but I moved in with them with a new baby, an 8-year-old girl and an alcoholic husband. And my parents were really high dependent. And my life was like that for 3 years. And then when Mum died, Father wanted to go to church and I went to church with him. We all went because it was the thing to do after a funeral. And I sat in church and I've never felt so much at home anywhere. And we went to church on and off, myself and my two girls, because my husband was elsewhere on Sundays, usually at opening time. And it stopped for a while until my youngest daughter wanted to go back to Sunday school. My eldest girl, Charlotte, refused to go, so Camilla and I just went to church on our own. And it was wonderful. And it wasn't until I'd been there for at least 3 months when Donald stopped me at the door and said, "Why do you never come up for communion?" And I said, "Well, there's one reason for that. I am not confirmed." So he said, and I quote, "There's a confirmation service next week. We'll get you in. We'll do your training afterwards. Say nothing." So I was in, and there it was the following week, St. Paul's, Withington, confirmed, with lots of little girls and boys, and there I was being confirmed. And it was the greatest day of my life. Absolutely wonderful. I was high as a kite, but then I didn't know what was going on. I hadn't realized that the Holy Spirit could have such an effect on one's body, mind and spirit. Anyway, we settled down. This was May 93, and things were really getting bad. My father had died the previous year, and in July, on Bastille Day, my husband came home after cashing what was once called a gyro. And I said, "Have you got any money left?" And he said, "I've got £10. What do you want it?" So he threw it at me and I said, "Yes, I'll have that." So I packed a case and left with him, with my two daughters, came to Leigh. That's how I got here, folks. And my sister, who I moved in with, Gwen, who most of you know, announced on Saturday night, she says, "Well, we all go to church, you know, you'll be on your own." I said, "No, I won't, because we go to church too." And that was it. And my faith journey began with this book. And on that day, not knowing anything. And it grew and grew. And those at St. Peter's who know me saw it grow, witnessed it grow. And if I'd have been told on that day when I received this book by the bishop, "One day you will be a vicar," I'd have laughed him out of the church, never mind anyone else. And I have not had a great time. My time has been tortuous. I raised 2 girls on my own, but actually I didn't, because I may have left my husband, but I got a new one in God, who made sure I was financially sound, who loves me to bits, who looked after my daughters, and has brought me to this day. And I give him all the thanks for it. And that's my story. So Kevin, what's yours?
Oh, I'll have a pint of Guinness. Thank you. Oh, I see. Sorry. Yes. Okay. My story. Well, yeah, I was brought up in the West Country. I was baptized at 5 weeks old by a friend of my parents who was a minister or worship leader in the Independent Methodist Church. Only because my parents had sort of serially fallen out with just about everybody else. So over the years. And so anyway, I was baptized there, but church didn't really have much of an impact in my life as a young person, although I did go to Sunday school, or rather was sent to Sunday school, first of all at Hanham Baptist Church, because that was quite close to where I lived as a small child. And then when we moved to the Anglican church around the corner from where we were. But about 9 years old, that stopped, partly because even then I couldn't see the point of being sent to Sunday school. I would much rather, in fact, that everybody, sort of kind of went as well, but nobody did. So I thought, why should I have to go when my dad was staying at home to watch football on the TV on Sunday afternoon? And by the time I kind of worked my way into my teens, I was worshipping at the altar of Bristol City Football Club at Ashton Gate. And nothing really happened on, let's say, the religious front until I was 18 years old and went to Austria on holiday. And while I was there, I had what you might call a conversion experience. Just the immensity, the beauty of the natural world, the mountains, and I knew why. So I knew how these mountains came to be. The Earth's crust, gets pushed, and mountains go up, and all the rest. But why? What for? Apart from the sheer beauty of it all. And I began to sort of work on the theory that there must be something or someone behind it all, and that thing or such that was God. So I wanted to find out more about this God. So when I came back to the UK, I started knocking on doors of vicarages and places like that and saying, hello, can you tell me about God, please? People must have thought I was insane. But one person invited me in, and his name was Tony Trafford, who was a Catholic priest at a church called St. Nicholas, just along the road from where I was working in Bristol at the time. And he said, yeah, come on in. He said, the thing is, he said, I can't talk to you now. He said, but we'll have a chat on Friday after work. He said, when I've come back from playing squash. And I thought to myself, hey, a squash playing priest, that sounds pretty cool. We'll go for some of that. So I went round to his place at about 5 o'clock and spent an hour or so there talking to him about my thoughts and everything. And he introduced me to this person called Jesus, who I obviously knew about from Sunday school. But then he talked about this whole thing of being in a relationship with this Jesus, which was a whole new thing to me. But anyway, after a long conversation, he then said, I'd like to give you a few things. He gave me some little booklets. But one thing he also gave me was a bookmark, or rather a prayer card. On one side was a picture, and on the other side was a prayer, which apparently had been written by this person. And when I hold it up there, you'll be able to see it. Now, this is a chap called Charles de Foucauld. And Charles de Foucauld was a Frenchman who lived in the 19th and early 20th century. And Charles was a bit of a lad in his younger days. He was a captain in the French army, I believe, and he himself had a conversion experience. And he tried various expressions of religious life. And he even went to the Trappists and found them not severe enough for his liking. Now, if you think you're too tough even for the Trappists, you must be tough. And he decided that what he wanted to do really was to go and to experience what was called the Nazareth life of Jesus, which was those hidden years that we know nothing really about, where Jesus just kind of lived and worked, and he was a presence, in his hometown. And Charles de Foucauld decided that what he wanted to do was to be that kind of expression of the Christian life, just quietly getting on with his life amidst, well, others. And the others he saw were the different nomadic tribes that were in North Africa at the time. So off he went, having become ordained as a priest, and he stayed there. And in fact, he never made a convert in his life. In terms of, let's say, success, well, he wasn't. But he was faithful. Sadly, his life ended on the 1st of December 1916, when he was shot by a tribesman, and his story was long forgotten for many years. But there were those who heard of his story and kind of, in a sense, picked it up and ran with it, to use a rugby term, and they wanted to live that kind of life too. And now there are little brothers of Jesus and little sisters of Jesus living after the example of Charles de Foucauld all over the world. And Charles de Foucault's prayer is one of abandonment, about, I abandon myself into your hands, do with me what you will. And I realized that was what I wanted too. So I spent my time learning more about the Christian faith. I was confirmed, received into the church and so on. And after a period, I felt called to ordination. And so I spoke to my parish priest in the locality where I was, who belonged to a missionary order called the Oblates of Mary Immaculate. And I was then invited to go to Dublin to train for ordination as a Catholic missionary priest. And I was on my way there, not quite literally, but about to go, when something happened. And that was I discovered women. And that was the end of that, my Catholic priest journey. What actually happened was I fell into the Church of England a bit by accident. I was invited to somebody's wedding, and I went along to the local Anglican church that I'd never attended before. And it was quite a high Anglican church with Stations of the Cross and the Reserved Sacrament and all the rest of it. Made me feel very much at home. And so I liked it and I stayed. And then a couple of years later, I went to see the parish priest. And I said, "Look, I still feel called to ordination." He said, "Oh, thank goodness for that. I've been waiting for ages for you to come and tell me." So I then went through the selection process and I was ordained in 1993, the same year as Janet's confirmation. And I would say that that has kind of stayed with me ever since, as indeed has this prayer card and bookmark. It stayed with me from the age of 18. So the last 40 years almost. It's the longest relationship I've ever had with anyone, with God and Jesus. And I think it's the longest lasting I think I will ever get to have. And I'm very happy about that. And just occasionally, I try to live up to that whole thing of abandonment and totally giving myself to God. I'm not very good at it, but I do keep trying. So that's my story.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I have noticed in all our stories there is a particular similarity. I know Karen and Judith, you both say you were what I call cradle Christians. You went to church as children. Kevin and I didn't so much, shall we say. And yet, each and every one of us, God called us in our maturity, in when we were grown up enough to listen to him, I think, when we were grown up enough to understand exactly what he was asking from us. And although each of us has a very different story to tell, God is still then the main theme of all our stories. So thank you very much for sharing them. Kevin, could you let everyone know what the sign-in details are for this evening, please? You're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Yes, I have here the high technology digital display board here,
Wow.
which is for our Zoom chat. So we're going to go and have a brew in just a minute, and then in 15 minutes or so, come back and join us again. And the Zoom code is 843 4882 3223. So that's 843 4882 3223. And the password is 025728. That's 025728. If you have any problems trying to connect, then just put a message up then on the site that you're watching on now and saying help, and we'll make sure that you can see it. So there we go.
Thank you for that, Kevin. So we look forward to seeing you in after brew time. So in the meantime, we're all going to switch on kettles. Thank you very much.